If you grew up in the American Sunbelt, across the sprawling, sun-bleached suburban developments of Phoenix, Las Vegas, or Southern California, you know how eerily identical those neighborhoods feel. Block after block of beige stucco houses, terracotta roof tiles, and manicured lawns, built overnight on top of scraped desert soil. By day, these master-planned communities seem almost sterile in their safety. But at night, when the dry desert air drops 20 degrees and the air conditioning units stop humming, a heavy, oppressive quiet settles over the cul-de-sacs. The timber framing inside modern drywall homes expands and contracts with the temperature shift, producing sharp creaks and pops. Most homeowners dismiss these nocturnal sounds as simple structural settling. However, among suburban night shift workers, late-night streamers, and local trade contractors, a disturbing rumor has spread across horror forums and true crime channels. If you buy an early 2000s tract home and hear rhythmic scratching inside the hallway wall at exactly 3:15 a.m., do not knock back on the drywall. Do not shine your phone light into the attic access hatch. And no matter how clearly you hear your roommate or spouse calling your name from the crawl space, do not open the utility door. Internet storytellers and urban investigators call it the wall walker, or more intimately, the thin man in the drywall. Unlike traditional ghosts that haunt historic New England mansions, this entity belongs entirely to modern American sprawl. Legend says it originates from abandoned construction sites, specifically houses left unfinished during economic crashes, when homeless squatters or lost teenagers crawled into the unsealed insulation bays during freezing desert nights and perished unnoticed, their terror fused with the cheap pine framing and fiberglass bats. The entity exists inside the dead space between your interior walls, the hollow, 6-inch gaps where electrical wires run and copper pipes sweat. It survives by imitating house noises, the drip of a pipe, the ticking of a water heater, or the muffled sound of a family member talking in another room. Its goal is psychological exhaustion. It waits until you're isolated, anxious, and sleep-deprived. Once you acknowledge its presence by tapping on the wall or opening an access panel, it projects a subtle sensory glamour. To the victim, the dark, dust-choked cavity inside the wall suddenly looks like a spacious hallway, luring them inside where the studs narrow until they are trapped forever. My name is Ryan. In the autumn of 2024, I was 26, working remotely as an editor for a popular YouTube paranormal investigation channel based out of Scottsdale, Arizona. I was an absolute skeptic. My entire job consisted of cleaning up audio tracks, adding jump scare sound effects, and debunking fake ghost videos sent in by subscribers. I viewed urban legends as nothing more than clever viral marketing designed to farm engagement clicks. Then I bought my first fixer-upper, a 3-bedroom stucco house built in 2004, sitting at the dead end of a quiet cul-de-sac in Surprise, Arizona. The house had been bank foreclosed and sat vacant for 3 years. The interior smelled faintly of stale carpet, paint fumes, and dry desert dust. Because I worked late editing videos for the channel's midnight upload schedule, I kept inverted sleeping hours. I was usually awake alone in my home office between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. while the rest of the neighborhood slept. The weirdness started during my second week in the house. It was October 12th, roughly 3 seconds 10 a.m. I was sitting at my dual monitor setup with noise-canceling headphones on, cutting together an episode about abandoned hospitals. Even through my padded headphones, I felt a low vibration travel through the hardwood floor beneath my desk. I pulled off my headset and listened. The house was dead silent. The central AC was off. The sound came from directly behind my desk, inside the interior partition wall that separated my office from the master hallway. It sounded like thick cardboard being dragged across raw wooden studs, followed by the distinct pitter-patter of long, thin fingernails dragging down the backside of the sheetrock. "Great," I muttered, rubbing my bloodshot eyes. "Mice in the insulation." I stood up, walked over to the wall, and tapped my knuckles against the drywall twice. Knock, knock. I expected the scratching to stop as the hypothetical rodent scattered. Instead, the response was immediate. Knock, knock. 2 identical heavy thuds echoed back from the exact spot where my knuckles had touched the wall. The impact was so hard that a tiny puff of white gypsum dust trickled down from an unused electrical outlet near the baseboard. My stomach dropped. That wasn't a mouse or a roof rat. Something large was standing upright inside the hollow 6-inch wall cavity. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice sounding thin and weak in the empty house. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, the sound shifted. The scratching began traveling upward toward the ceiling, joists, moving with an unnaturally fast, fluid rhythm. Skitter, 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 like a massive centipede crawling along the wooden framing. It moved across the office ceiling and stopped directly above the small, square drywall access hatch in the hallway ceiling that led to the attic. Then, a voice spoke from the attic hatch. It didn't sound like a monster. It sounded like my channel's lead presenter and close friend, Mark. The tone was perfectly relaxed, carrying the exact cadence and Midwestern accent he used when we were hanging out. "Hey, Ryan. Man, I left my camera rig up in your attic earlier. Can you drop the ladder down and hand it to me? It's really dark up here." Cold sweat instantly broke out across my forehead and chest. Mark was in Los Angeles attending a creator convention. I had talked to him on FaceTime 3 hours earlier. There was zero chance he was standing in my dust-filled attic at 3 in the morning. I stepped backward into the office, my eyes glued to the white wooden square in the hallway ceiling. Remember the forum posts? A random memory flashed through my brain from a debunking script I had edited weeks ago. The drywall entity mimics your peers. It needs you to open the hatch. "Ryan? Come on, man," the voice called out again from the ceiling. This time, the voice sounded slightly off, like a low-quality MP3 file that had been stretched out, with a faint background hum of static. "Pull the string. Drop the ladder. I'm right above you." I reached down to my desk with a trembling hand and grabbed my mirrorless camera, the high-end Sony rig I used for editing. I switched the camera to night vision video mode, turned on the bright infrared spotlight mounted on top, and flipped the viewfinder screen toward me. I lifted the camera and aimed the lens toward the ceiling hatch. Through my bare eyes, the hallway looked completely normal, just a dark ceiling with a white access panel. But on my camera's infrared screen, the reality was sickening. The white wooden panel of the attic hatch was bulging downward under immense weight, bowing as if something heavy was resting its entire body on the thin piece of plywood. Cradled around the edges of the hatch frame were 8 long, gray, impossibly thin fingers. The digits had too many joints, bending backward like spider legs as they gripped the drywall. Through the tiny quarter-inch gap between the hatch and the ceiling frame, the camera's IR light caught a pair of massive, reflective eyes staring straight down the lens at me. They weren't human. They looked like giant, milky white marbles floating in a face made of dry, pale insulation fibers. "Look at me, Ryan," the stretched-out voice rasped from the ceiling. The illusion was dropping. The voice was warping into a dry, metallic hiss. "Open the hatch. It's so tight in here. Let me down." Panic seized my limbs. I lowered the camera and backed toward my desk, knocking over a stack of hard drives. The moment I looked away from the camera screen, the entity realized its trick had failed. The gentle mimicking stopped. Boom, boom, boom. The entire ceiling shook violently as the entity began slamming its weight against the attic hatch, trying to splinter the frame. Gypsum dust and popcorn ceiling flakes rained down onto the hallway carpet. The walls groaned as something massive and emaciated thrashed through the narrow crawl space between the ceiling joists. I grabbed my car keys from the desk, slammed the office door shut, and ran blindly down the main entry hall toward the front door. As I reached the foyer, the wall next to me, the one housing the main HVAC air intake, erupted with horrific scratching. Long, indented drag marks appeared on the outside of the latex paint from the inside, as if invisible claws were trying to slice their way through the sheetrock to catch me. I ripped the front door open, sprinted across the dew-slick lawn, and scrambled into my pickup truck. I hit the ignition, slammed the truck into reverse, and backed out of the driveway so fast the tires squealed against the quiet suburban pavement. As my headlights swept across the front of my house, I looked up at the small, decorative vent near the roof peak. Hunched behind the tiny wooden slats of the gable vent, bathed in my high beams, was a long, pale, distorted shape. It was pressing its flat, featureless face against the vent mesh, watching my truck speed away into the desert night. Part 4. The Inspection. I spent the rest of that night parked in a brightly lit 24-hour Waffle House parking lot off the interstate, shivering despite the warm truck heater, unable to close my eyes for a single second. When the sun finally rose over the White Tank Mountains at 7 a.m., the psychological terror melted into the harsh, golden Arizona sunlight. The neighborhood looked completely peaceful again. Suburban families were walking dogs, and school buses were rolling down the streets. I called an old friend, Dave, a licensed home inspector and former military veteran, to meet me at the property. I didn't tell him about the voice or the eyes. I simply told him I heard a large animal crashing around inside the structure. Dave walked through the house carrying a heavy flashlight, a thermal imaging camera, and a crowbar. When we stepped into the hallway, my heart sank. The floor was littered with white plaster dust. The wooden frame of the attic hatch was cracked along the hinges, hanging down by a single strip of molding. "Damn, man," Dave said, shining his torch up into the opening. Whatever was up there was huge. You might have had a mountain lion or a massive stray dog crawl through an unsealed soffit vent. Dave set up a tall aluminum ladder, clicked his thermal camera on, and slowly climbed up to poke his head into the attic space. I stood at the bottom of the ladder, my knuckles white, holding a heavy wrench. For 2 long minutes, Dave was quiet, panning his flashlight and thermal camera through the dark, blown cellulose insulation above the joists. "Hey, Ryan." Dave's voice came down from the ceiling, sounding strangely hushed and confused. "Come up here and look at this. You're going to want to see this before I call the city." I swallowed hard, climbed the ladder steps, and poked my head above the ceiling line. The attic was stiflingly hot, smelling of heated dust and dry fiberglass. Dave pointed his high-powered flashlight toward the far corner of the roofline, where the rafters sloped down to meet the exterior wall above my home office. There, cleared out in the middle of the pink insulation bats, was a nest. Dozens of household items, things that had gone missing from the previous owners 3 years ago, were neatly arranged in a circle. Rusted kitchen knives, faded family photographs with the eyes scratched out, empty water bottles, and torn strips of clothing. But what made my stomach turn completely inside out were the walls. On the raw wooden framing studs surrounding the nest, hundreds of desperate, overlapping sentences had been carved into the pine wood with a sharp object. I leaned closer to read the carved writing illuminated in Dave's flashlight beam. "It's too tight in here. Don't close the drywall. I can hear them talking in the kitchen. They won't let me out. Ask them to pull the hatch." Right beneath the writing, wedged firmly between 2 wall studs that dropped down into my office, was a pair of old, rotted sneakers, pointing downward into the dark wall cavity. Dave stared at the thermal camera in his hand. The screen showed a lingering, deep blue cold spot, a human-shaped outline, stretching vertically down inside the hollow interior wall of my office. "The frame is sealed from the inside," Dave muttered, his face pale. "Ryan, someone didn't break into your attic. Someone was sealed inside these walls when they drywalled this house 20 years ago." Part 5. The Open Market. I listed the house on the market 3 days later. I sold it at a loss to a corporate real estate investment group that flips homes without doing physical walkthroughs. I didn't care about the money. I packed my belongings into a rental van in broad daylight and moved into a 3rd-floor apartment in downtown Phoenix. I never finished editing that paranormal video for the YouTube channel. In fact, I quit my editing job entirely a month later. Working with audio files and night vision footage became too triggering. It's been 2 years since that night in Surprise. I try to live a normal life now. I enjoy the bustling city sounds, the neon streetlights, and the comfort of concrete apartment walls. But the psychological scars of that night have never fully healed. Whenever I visit friends who live in suburban tract homes, whenever I sit in a quiet living room and hear the sudden pop of framing timber settling in the night, my chest tightens. If you live in a modern home built with hollow drywall and you're lying awake in bed at 3 a.m., pay close attention to the sounds behind your headboard. If you hear a quiet scratching sound inside the sheetrock, do not tap back. If you hear your name whispered from the air vent, do not answer. And if you feel a cold draft coming from your ceiling hatch, do not look up.